Hello, today on Typical Books, we're going to talk about the Stephen King novella Elevation. It is a very short book, and I guess you have to have a name like Stephen King to get Simon & Schuster to publish such a short little thing. It says a novel on it. I didn't count the words as I read them, so I could not verify that this is indeed a novel. It strikes me as a novella. But for $25 Canadian, I suppose it's worth it for the Stephen King collector. It's also worth it for the Stephen King collector that is very interested in all of the mentions on that massive Stephen King spreadsheet, because this adds yet another entry to that where George Bannerman, or Bannerman Road more specifically, is mentioned in the area of Castle Rock, because that's where this takes place. George Bannerman, I would remember from Cujo. Some may remember him from Dead Zone. He met his end in Cujo. So yeah, Stephen King, Elevation, a novel. It is not horror, I would say. It does have some horrific ideas in it, much like a cosmic horror, something bigger than you going on, or something that's out of your control. If you find that scary, then it would indeed be horror. But it features no monsters, it features no shapeshifters, it features no distinct madness of man. In fact, the thing that would drive someone mad going on in this doesn't really affect the lead character at all. The lead character is very Stephen Kingish. Scott Carey is a man who suddenly begins to lose weight somehow. Not unlike Thinner, although it has nothing to do with a curse. But he is losing weight, but not visibly losing weight. He's losing weight inside somehow, and he feels a little light. Not light in his loafers, because we don't want to make a joke about our gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans friends, although this is a very forward thinking GLBT positive novel, because it does feature his neighbors who he doesn't get along with. There is some fighting between him and his neighbors, Missy and Deirdre. It's specifically Dee Dee that seems to have a problem with Scott through this. They are vilified by this small, predominantly white, waspish, anti-gay community, which you wouldn't think that Castle Rock would be like that, but I guess if you peel the layers away, you find all sorts of dirt underneath. And so it is a fascinating little vignette, not horror, though, but a very fun read for the collector. Very artistically bound. It has some illustrations throughout in some of the facing pages for each chapter. So it is a very lovingly put together book. Great for the collector. So this is a very short elevation talk, because I'm going to talk a little more about my TBR and what I'm currently reading. What I'm currently reading, there's one missing here. This is like super boring, I suppose, is Heaven, V.C. Andrews. Like I said, I was going to start doing. You've already seen that. The DIY Newsroom is just some personal reading. I like nonfiction stuff. And I'm currently reading something that will come up on the show, Dead Air by Matthew M. Bartlett. And this is a request from my husband, who has a lot of Bartlett stuff. And this is where I'm starting, partially because my podcast is also named Dead Air, so it's kind of funny. But this is very interesting. People who like Welcome to Night Vale would really enjoy this sort of stuff. Coming up sooner than later, we have Kill Creek, something that I've been meaning to get to for a while. I love the cover art, and I've had really good reviews of this particular book. So that is sort of on the bottom of the pile right now. Second last on the pile is Horrorstör. It was mentioned in comments from the previous video. Mentioning Horrorstör alone reminded me I needed to get to this. I really wanted to cover a Grady Hendrix book that was fiction, not nonfiction. So I haven't read any of his fiction stuff. And Priscilla requested that I get into In the Valley of the Sun. And I'm very excited to see how this pans out, because it's vampires, it seems to be Western, it's also modern from what I gather, and it seemed right up my alley, and I do love modern and twist on the vampire tale. So apparently that's all that this is, and that hits my little horror buttons. And before I forget, I'm going to be featured as an author interview on thehorrortree.com, one of my favorite news sites. They used to be almost predominantly only submission calls for horror authors, but then they ventured into quite a bit of horror news, and they're not inundated with a messy website. So I've really enjoyed the Horror Tree for a number of years, not only for submission calls, and they do the gamut of submission calls from pro-paying markets to for the love markets. So if you're an aspiring horror author, aren't we all, then you check out Horror Tree. Or if you're interested in hearing more about me, Rochelle, the interviewer, did a really good job. So check out horrortree.com. She curated some really great questions, one of the more compelling and fun interviews that I've ever done. So my fun hopefully will translate and you'll have fun reading it. So yeah, I do recommend Elevation Stephen King to people who enjoy Stephen King and are collectors of Stephen King, or like Stephen King's non-horror entries, just like him as a literary fiction author, and that's exactly what this is. So that's it. Elevation by Stephen King, a lot of TBR, even though I got a big stack of books to read. If you think there's something that I should check out, let me know. Let me know what you're reading in the comments too. Have an ooky, spooky day. It's a catchphrase now, I guess.